And David Bowie, I think, on that day, pre-concert, gave 2 interviews. One to Billy Sloan, who knew everything there was to know about the music industry, a bit like yourself. And he decided to give another interview to a guy who was a bit of a chancer, Jim White from Scottish TV.
No way.
I had a problem with alcohol for many years, and I tried to work with it, and I tried to work through it, and that doesn't work. Kick it into touch. And for the last 12 years, I've been sober. And by God, those 12 years have been wonderful, more wonderful than I could ever imagine.
Can we call her?
Yes, for sure.
You know, if you're happy.
Yes.
Hello.
Charlene.
Virgin Radio 80s Plus.
Jim White, welcome along to Virgin Radio and Virgin Radio 80s Plus. It's lovely to see you this end of the corridor.
I know, Steve, I'm delighted to be here. I see you walking by every day. You're all so warm with your greeting. It's so good to be sitting with you in there, because along at Talk Sport, everybody can't stand each other. So in here, I feel a sense of warmth and love already.
You guys are very feisty, aren't you, all together? But
myself and Simon.
Well, exactly. I was going to start there. What a team. I mean, you do 10 to 1, don't you? 10 a.m., 1 p.m., Monday to Friday on Talk Sport. I've seen the amount of text messages this man receives. I've never seen anything like it in 25 years of being in radio.
Steve, that's very kind of you. We are very, very proud of what this thing has become. How would I describe Lord Jordan or Edward Longshanks, as he's known to people north of Hadrian's Wall? He is fantastic to be on with, Steve. Of course, all his knowledge and experience of what it's been like to own a football club comes right into play.
Yeah.
He can tell us about dealings with players, dealings with agents, many of whom he can't stand, and he makes no bones about that.
No, he goes for it.
Oh, he goes for it, Steve. Oh, and his dealings with one-time fellow owners. He is fabulous, and it just seems to click, and we're so proud of it.
Well, I hear that he was slightly jealous that you were asked first to come on, so maybe if he's up for it, he could be a future guest. But this week it's all about you, Jim.
Thank you, as it should be.
On my 80s playlist. Now, this list of songs is brilliant. There's not one kind of filler track here.
Do you think so?
We're going to start with The Police, Every Breath You Take. Why have you picked this, Jim?
Well, I used to love the Police. I used to love them. Sting was an absolute standout performer for me. In another life, Steve, and I'll talk about this more with you, before I came to TalkSport, I was at Sky. Before I went to Sky Sports, around 1998, I was many years at Scottish TV. And I was kind of jack of all trades and master of none. I was a news reporter. At one stage, I was kind of entertainment reporter.
Yeah.
And then I got into football, and the rest was history. I went to the World Cup in Mexico in 1986, and thereafter it was football. But in that time, as so-called entertainment reporter, if you like, I used to love it. I used to dart about. And on this occasion, we're talking about 1983, I was through in Edinburgh at the Edinburgh Playhouse, somewhere you, I'm quite sure, are familiar with.
Yeah.
And I was told that the police were in the building. They were doing a sound check. They were doing a concert. So I was like a rad rag to a bull. I was after them. I wanted to interview one of them, all of them. Could I do it? And police's management let me into the Playhouse, and I managed to get a one-to-one with Sting.
Oh, wow.
And he was fantastic to me.
Was he?
He was delightful.
Is he a good guy?
Lovely guy. He was so nice. He helped me through the interview. You know what it's like. You've been doing this for years. You've met these guys. You know how the experience is to be opposite them. And you're reliant on them to help you with information, with little backstories. He was great, I must say, and it's still fresh in my mind. And whenever I hear on your show, on Virgin, on any other show on the radio, if I hear a police track, it takes me back to me sitting opposite Sting in conversation with him.
Amazing. That's great. China Girl by David Bowie is up next.
Wow.
Take me back, because this song is just kind of it's summer in my mind. Just ensues as soon as I hear the opening notes. Tell me why you picked this one, because lots of guests have come on here and they say it's a very difficult process to pick one David Bowie song or your favourite David Bowie song.
Right.
Why have you picked this?
The video stands out to me. It's so fresh in my mind. When I first saw it, I thought it was incredible. Bowie, for a start, facially, his image, he was unique. And I was fascinated by him, Steve. Fascinated by him. And that bit in China Girl, when they go into the instrumental parts in the middle and the heavy guitar comes in.
Yeah.
And he and the girl have the passionate clinch and kiss.
I'm picturing this, yeah.
And the camera is going round them. It was masterful in terms of the direction of the video, but it was brilliant the way they pulled it off, the two of them. It was phenomenal. Now, there's another story to this as well, Steve, and this might throw you away. This might blow your mind. In Scotland, when I was at Scottish TV, I always used to bump into the Daily Record's entertainment writer, who was Billy Sloan. Mm-hmm. And I think the date was around late June 1983. I was through in Edinburgh. It was the Serious Moonlight tour, and Bowie was on tour. And David Bowie, I think on that day, pre-concert, gave 2 interviews. One to Billy Sloan, who knew everything there was to know about the music industry, a bit like yourself. Uh-huh. And he decided to give another interview to a guy who was a bit of a chancer, Jim White from Scottish TV.
No way.
And I interviewed David Bowie.
How did you manage that?
I got about 10 minutes with him before he went on stage. He was wearing a powder blue suit. There's a couple of images on Twitter. If you look on Twitter, if you key in Jim White and David Bowie, you'll see a picture of me with a very unfashionable head of hair, this black hair of mine that was like curly everywhere, and a very unfashionable moustache, right, which I regret to this day. And the other picture was David Bowie looking as cool as you like, staring at my unfashionable moustache. But he was wonderful, Steve. I'll never forget it. I couldn't believe I was sitting opposite Bowie. And again, like Sting at the Playhouse in Edinburgh, David Bowie was just a dream.
Yeah.
And he knew I wasn't the most knowledgeable in this field, but he was a star. Mm-hmm. And he made the interview, and he was wonderful. And I was pinching myself when I was talking to him. And I always remember it, Steve. I don't know if there's a rough cut of it anywhere, but I pushed it into the 10 minutes and just over the 10 minutes.
Yeah. As
you would do, as anybody would do in our industry. And all I heard was in the background, Bowie's in the middle of an answer, and all I heard was somebody shouting, 15 minutes to showtime. And Bowie turned around and he said, wow, 15 minutes to showtime, I better go. And he did. But he finished his answer. He said, it's been a pleasure meeting you. And then the next thing, he was on stage doing Heroes.
I've heard from lots of people that he's almost, to be in his presence, he was almost otherworldly. Would
Absolutely
you go along with that?
You've nailed it. He was absolutely that. I mean, I could hardly get my words out at the start of the interview. For Billy Sloan of the Daily Record, and I'll tell Billy, I often meet him, I'll tell him that you and I are doing this today. I'll tell him that this is coming up. He came through an interview with David Bowie like second nature for Billy, very experienced. But for me, and I looked at these guys, and I've had it to a degree in football. I've sat in front of Pelé since. I've sat in front of Johan Cruyff and people who I absolutely admired beyond belief.
Yeah. And
it gives you that tingle as you have had in your career, Steve. But with Bowie, I was like, oh my good God, he's doing this for me. And he was wonderful. And then the next thing, I was down the front, a very privileged position at Murrayfield on the day of the gig, and watching him there on stage. And I've never forgotten it, and that's why I wanted to give it special mention to you today.
Amazing story. Thank you so much for sharing that. This next track by the Thompson Twins is kind of definitive. It's got that 80s sound, hasn't it? Can I take you back, just before we go into this track, a young Jim White, early 80s. Did you always know that you were going to be doing what you're doing now? Was it the dream? Was it the young Jim dream?
Do you know what? That's such a great question. I didn't really know what I was going to do, Steve. I was brought up in Glasgow. I came at the end of my school time. I was looking in a newspaper, and I ended up going to Edinburgh to Napier College to do what was called a pre-entry journalism course. And for 1 year through in Edinburgh at Napier College, I did just that. Newspaper practice, Scots law, that kind of thing. And if you passed the course, you got a job in weekly newspapers. Mm-hmm. So I did that, chasing fire engines, doing a bit of court reporting.
Yeah.
And then I think it was 1979, age 21, I got a job at Scottish TV. And I got in, and not long after that, when I was 22, 23, I managed to get on air. And I just did everything. I thought, right, now that I've got this far, I may as well try to do whatever I can to maintain it. And I've always got through it with just enthusiasm, bags of enthusiasm, Steve.
Yeah.
Going after things, trying to be absolutely bang on and accurate, never letting anybody down. And then, as I say, a bunch of news stories, covered many news stories at Scottish TV, some serious, some not so serious, some entertainment based. I interviewed Emmylou Harris, I think, in Glasgow one day. I managed to persuade the management team of Paul McCartney and Wings to bring Paul McCartney, Denny Lane and Linda into Scottish TV at Cowcaddens.
Wow.
And I interviewed McCartney.
Wow.
I don't remember much about it because he looked as baffled as Linda and Denny at some of the questions I was firing at them. But again, like Bowie and like Sting, they made the interview. They were just charming and delightful. He said, "Your name's Jim. Are you James or Jim?" I said, "James." He said, "That's the name of my son." That's lovely, isn't it?
It's so dishonourable.
Absolutely that. And I found it was a real magic meeting these people. I found it intriguing. It gave me such a buzz. I mean, the Rolling Stones played the Glasgow Apollo, and I went round to the side lane of Glasgow Apollo, which of course is no longer there. The Apollo Theatre no longer with us. But Jagger pulled up in a car with Jerry Hall, and I unsuccessfully tried to vox pop him. You know what that is. "Hi, mate, Jim White. Would you mind giving?" And he was in. And I thought, well, I've missed the opportunity. And about 15 minutes later, some member of the Stones management team said, "Come in, he'll give you 5 minutes." And the cameraman and myself went in, and the next thing I'm talking to Jagger. And the funny thing I remember about that was, I said, "Well, it's so good for Glaswegians tonight, Mick. It's a sellout. I mean, the ticket price, £6.50. How have you done it?" And Jagger was like, £6.50? We're being a bit too generous here.
Yeah, who made up that price?
Yeah, and Jagger was lovely. So it was all that kind of thing, Steve, and I loved it. And then much further on, there was a chance to get into some football, and I got involved in covering some documentary type material. I went out to Italy to do a documentary on Graham Souness, who played for Sampdoria in Genoa after he'd finished at Liverpool, and thereafter I went to Mexico for the World Cup, and Scotland were in the World Cup in 1986. Last nation to arrive, first nation to be eliminated, all that. You know, I'm Scottish, we're used to it. And it was great. And thereafter it was football, it was sport. And many years after that, Sky came in for me when I was at the World Cup in 1998 in France.
Amazing.
And they said to me, come and join us.
Yeah. And you were there for so long, weren't you?
Yeah, I was there for so long. And I was there for 23 years at Sky. I moved to London eventually, and I've been in London ever since.
We're going to some of those huge names, massive figures that you've interviewed, that you've met over the years. Quickly tell me, Thompson Twins, why you want this song. It actually comes up quite a lot on this feature.
Does it?
And everyone gives me a different story, different reason. Why does this mean so much to you?
Do you know the thing that got me, Steve, was they intrigued me. Their look intrigued me. The three of them, they were all different.
Yeah.
And the way they danced, the way they were so cooler than cool. I loved it. The two guys, and she was, I can't remember her name. Was it Alana? I can't remember.
Yes,
I think she was a New Zealander.
Yeah.
And I loved it, but I loved the number. The number was fantastic. His voice, the tone of his voice intrigued me. And I just felt good. It's like, why do you like anything, Steve, in the music business? Either you like them or you like the sound of them. And I liked both when it came to them.
Yeah.
And they nailed it for me. I really loved it. Whenever I hear it now, it still resonates with me.
Great, isn't it? You get properly, one of those songs you get emotionally involved and just represents that era.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Precisely.
Brilliant pick.
Good.
Brilliant pick. I must ask you, let's talk about the B-52s. Then I want to chuck a couple of questions at you about really famous people that you've met. Amazing people you met. B-52s. Now, this perfect song, because we're Virgin Radio 80s Plus, and the plus bit means we can visit the early part of the 90s. I'm an anorak. This came out in 1990, but that's fine.
Okay.
Tell me why you want this lot.
The B-52s fascinated me a bit like the Thompson Twins did, because of their stage appearance, because of the way they went about it. I just thought they were so different with the girls. And the way that Fred, was it?
Fred.
The singer?
Yeah.
Wonderful presence. catch us up because we're going for it. And again, the lyrics, the music, the drummer was brilliant. You might remember his name, I don't. But Love Shack was just a fabulous track. Again, the first time I heard it, I thought, who is that?
Yeah, it was
what
so
is that?
different.
Yeah.
You could have placed it in other decades, couldn't you, as well? It was
Absolutely.
very clever.
I think they came from the same kind of area in the States as R.E.M., and they kind of left you kind of open-mouthed. And I thought, I'm having some of them.
Yeah.
I love that. And to me, whenever I went to a performance, if they looked as if they were thoroughly enjoying it and giving us something different, then I'm certainly up for that. I'll go with you on that.
Yeah.
And I just went with them for the ride. And again, it's like if I hear it today, I just think a classic.
Yeah.
A
puts
classic.
you in a great mood as
you
well.
You can't get enough of it. And it puts you in a great mood.
Yeah. I must ask you a couple of quick fire questions because I'm sure you got some wonderful answers. Who is the most impressive person you've ever met, Jim? Because you've met them all. The most impressive.
The most impressive. I mentioned him earlier. I was fortunate to meet Pelé.
Wow.
When he was in London. And he was great. In actual fact, Steve, I'll tell you a funny story about that. I met Pelé in 1989. And he was the ambassador for the World Youth Tournament. And I met him in Glasgow, at Hampden Park in Glasgow. And he wore a Scotland tracksuit.
Wow.
And we embraced. And I've often put this picture out on Twitter. I was like, Pelé, I cannot believe it. I'm meeting you. Come here. And he embraces me. Many years later, I met him when he was a much older man, and I was a much older man. And I met him down here in London. I swear in my life, Steve, he looked at me. And he said, Hampden. Glasgow. I was like, no. And he said, come. And he wanted us to reenact the embrace. So we were pictured in the embrace then, and I got us that night in London pictured in the identical embrace.
Incredible. How did he remember that?
I put the two pictures out.
Wow.
And I said, I haven't forgotten Pelé, and I'm thrilled to say that he hasn't forgotten me. And it was just great. I've been lucky, mate. I mean, I've blagged it a lot in life. I ended up interviewing Margaret Thatcher once in Glasgow when she, as Prime Minister, arrived in Glasgow to do the draw for the semi-final of the Scottish Cup. Right. Can you believe that?
That's random.
I was given 3 questions. I was allowed 3 questions. She didn't like the third one, I don't think, when I suggested that her getting involved in the Scottish Cup draw was just a way of her trying to achieve cheap political gain. And if looks could kill, by God, she killed me with that look. But I got the question, and she treated me very well and very fairly. But I've been very fortunate. You make your own luck, as you know, Steve, in this business. Of course. You make your own luck. I remember in my role as entertainment reporter, I was through at the Edinburgh Festival, and I remember reading in the Times, the big act at the Edinburgh Festival is the dancer Rudolf Nureyev. And I looked at it and thought, I'm interviewing him. And I remember saying to the cameraman, we've got to try and find him. How are we going to find him in Edinburgh? And I think he was staying at the Caledonian Hotel, and I heard that he was going up to rehearse at the Usher Hall. So we pitched camp outside the Caledonian Hotel, and Rudolf Nureyev came out with his publicist and people. And again, it was a bit like Mick Jagger all the years before at the lane outside the Apollo. Nureyev looked at me and swept by. Very great. He was wearing a cap and a poncho, and he smiled at me but swept by. So we beat him up to the Usher Hall because he was going up to rehearse. Yeah. And as he got out his car at the Usher Hall, we were there to meet him again. I said, Rudolf, Mr. Nureyev, hi, it's me again. And he stood there. And he said, okay. And then I suddenly thought, right, what the hell am I going to ask him? So we spoke about Edinburgh. Yeah. He spoke about his love of the Scottish capital. Sometimes I walk the streets of Edinburgh when everyone is sleeping. I look at this beautiful Georgian city. I thought, this is phenomenal. Yeah, amazing. And his publicist, I think, said to me afterwards, that's the only interview Nureyev has ever done. And he was not asked about ballet. I thought, right, okay, well, let's draw a veil over that.
What is it that you've got then? It's been really, because you're really lovely. You're you're charming, you're personable, you're interested. You know.
You got to be interested.
Yeah.
You got to be tireless. You got to be enthusiastic. And you have to have an appetite for it. And anybody who's listening, if anybody ever tells you in our game, okay, you cannot interview X or Y, make it your business to get that interview. Yeah. By hook or by crook, but hopefully by the right side of things, you attempt to get it. You don't insult the individual. You get it, and you walk away. He's happy or she's happy, and you're happy. You managed to pull it off. And I think the sense of achievement you can get in our industry, Steve, is everything to me. And that's why I think I've still got the same sense of enthusiasm at 65 as I had at 21.
Yeah.
Because when that goes, everything goes.
Yeah.
You wake up, the morning you wake up disinterested, everything goes. And Steve, I emphasize, anybody out there who's struggling today, maybe with any kind of addiction. I had a problem with alcohol for many years, and I tried to work with it, and I tried to work through it, and that doesn't work. Kick it into touch. And for the last 12 years, I've been sober. And by God, those 12 years have been wonderful, more wonderful than I could ever imagine.
So you had to confront it head on.
Yeah, I confronted it. I did it kind of low key, Steve, and I just thought, that's not for me. I'm not for it, and I'm stopping. And I've stopped, and ever since, life has been great. And it's not a chore. I don't find it difficult. I don't really find it a challenge. I walk into a pub, and I'm delighted that other people around me are having a drink. It's just that I choose not to. And anybody out there, once or twice I've posted little messages on Twitter, and it gets a very positive reaction. And my heart and my love goes out to you. Come and join me, because this side of the divide is great.
That's amazing to hear. I know that would mean so much to so many
I
people.
hope so, mate. I hope
me.
so. It's said with deep sincerity.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. Thank you. Are you enjoying this? We're having a great time. I'm really enjoying this.
Mate, you're brilliant. It certainly beats being in a studio with Simon Jordan.
I'll try and be a bit more feisty for you.
Not at all. You be you.
We're going to go Talking Heads, Once in a Lifetime. Tell me about this song, Jim.
Talking Heads. I've never met David Byrne. I've spoken to him. I'd love to have met him. You'll probably know. You'll no doubt know. He spent almost all of his life in North America. I think he went over there at a very young age. I think he's 70 now, but he was born in Dumbarton.
That's right, yeah.
Dunbartonshire, not that far from Glasgow. My late father, Robbie, was born in Dumbarton. And I always used to think of Robbie when I listened to David Byrne. I thought, Dumbarton. But to me, again, this on-stage presence and the dancing that would go on with these backing singers.
It's just incredible.
Like
I mean, what was going on there?
What was going on there? Life during wartime, was it? When he's on stage dancing and he's doing the big powerful jog, and they're beside him doing the jog, and Tina, the bass player, is doing the jog as well.
Yeah.
He was just fantastic. I loved the guy. I think he was born in about 1952. He still looks brilliant for his years. And to me, that track, Once in a Lifetime, was just mad and spooky.
There's nothing else like it. There never was, and there isn't now, is there?
No. I mean, have you spoken about this track on many occasions? Does it baffle you like it baffles me? It's genius.
I was listening to a podcast which was solely dedicated to this track and what it means to people, and every single person's got a different story and a different reason why they love it and how it's resonated with them, but it's just completely out there.
It's out there,
isn't it?
It's out there. I find him a fascinating character. I really like them because on stage they really went for it, and they were great musicians. They're all great musicians, but having said that, as a collective, they were an unforgettable image on stage. They were brilliant. And David was he was a ringmaster. He just fantastic, and I loved him. But I think the intonation of his voice really struck me. It always struck me as very interesting. I've heard him interviewed many times, and I really like him. He intrigues me, as Bowie intrigued me. And I think David should be commended as having burst on the scene. But over there, he's a gigantic star, Steve.
Yeah.
I mean, he's loved. He's looked upon as iconic in the US. And certainly I just think he's one of the best ever exports from Dumbarton that we've ever had.
Yes, yeah, very well put. Yeah. I must ask you this, just going into a completely different area, because my best friend who lives in Washington said, you got to ask Jim about transfer deadline day, because you've gone down in history. I know there's a tie in a museum in Manchester, isn't there? Your yellow tie.
That's right.
Can you tell me about that? Because you are legendary for being on air for hours and hours and hours, aren't you?
Yeah.
Tell me about one of the most memorable occasions with that.
That's kind of you. It's kind of your friend in Washington. Sky hatched the idea. Obviously, transfer deadline day. The clue is in the title. It was all about player movement on this particular day, culminating in the final day, Steve, where players could move between certain clubs. But the deadline beckoned, and the deadline, whether it was midnight or 11 in the evening, or 9 in the evening, or 5 in the evening, and I was always the man in the hot seat. And it was all about the countdown to the deadline.
Yeah.
Could this move happen? Could this player go from Everton to Manchester United? But the clock is ticking. And of course, you know what it's like. You're a broadcaster. You get behind the very notion of what you're trying to achieve, and it's all about the clock ticking. Can it get done before this appointed time, or will it miss the deadline?
Yeah.
And it was all about a sense of urgency. And Sky had it was genius, really. This yellow breaking news slash image that went across me on the screen. It's done. Rooney has gone to Manchester United, blah, blah, blah. And this black headline on a yellow background would come across, hence the yellow tie.
Yes.
And yellow became synonymous with deadline day. And I'd be walking into the building at Sky, and guys would be hanging out vans going, you got the yellow tie, Jim? And, we're all ready, mate. And Harry Redknapp and I became synonymous with transfer deadline day, because he inevitably would be caught up in all the pantomime of it. He'd be pulling out the training ground, whether it was at Portsmouth or Spurs, right? Wind his window down, and he'd be giving it, hi everybody, we've got this over the line, we've got that. It was just crazy. It was nuts. And people still look at me when they see me out and about. We still do transfer deadline day in here.
I was going to say, do you miss doing it on TV, or is it the same?
No, because I do it now in Talk Sport, and it has the same impact, I find, as it had on telly.
Yeah.
And I did it. We pulled Simon into the last one. He came in kicking and screaming, because as an owner, he always get his pants pulled down trying to do deals on deadline day.
Yeah.
Because agents would always get more for a player as the clock ticked. And he needed that deal done. So Simon came in, not the greatest fan of deadline day, and he saw it from another vantage point. But no, I'm proud of it. It was great fun. They still do it very well at Sky, but we do it damn well here at Talk Sport. And it still resonates. It still gets a reaction like a day like no other gets.
Well, you've made it your own, just to hear your voice. Your voice is synonymous with this, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of you, Steve. I would walk into like Marks and Spencer's, and you'd hear guys shout, "Oh, this just in!" And you're like, "What?" A bit of breaking news.
So you made it when that happens.
That's think amazing, so. Yeah,
Jim.
It's very kind of them. And I think the yellow tie, you're right, is on some dummy, not me, but a dummy, in the Football Museum in Manchester, next to John Motson's sheepskin coat. So I don't know. They seem to love it, and they still love it, mate.
Jim, I love the fact you've gone for Texas. I must ask you quickly, why this song? Tell me why.
Tell me why. I love the drumming in it. I love the drive of it. But you know why I love it, Steve, and you're probably the same. Charlene Spiteri.
Oh.
I mean, what a voice.
Yeah.
She has the voice of an angel. It's unbelievable, her voice.
Now, I must ask you this, because Jeff Young, who you see the Radio 1 Big Beat show, came in and he helped sign Texas. And when he was on this show, he said, you do know that Charlene Spiteri the cut Jim White's hair.
True.
And I was like, is that true?
It is true. Steve, when I was trying to forge ahead with a career on screen at Scottish TV, and in an attempt to try and keep something of a trendy hairstyle, I used to go into this hairdressers in Glasgow. I don't know if it's still there. Renfield Street, I think it is. Irvin Rusk was the salon. And there was a girl there. She was so opinionated and chatty, but lovely.
Yeah.
An absolute darling. And her name was Charlene Spiteri. And she'd be like, Jim, how you doing? I saw you in Scottish TV. Your hair's a mess. And all this kind of thing. Oh, really? So she and I hit it off, and she would regularly go in and give me a haircut. I loved chatting to her.
Are you still in touch?
Every now and again, I keep in touch with her. I say hi. I mean, I think she came into Virgin not that long ago.
She did our Drive Time show. Yeah, she was here.
And I was on top. She's Celtic daft.
Right.
She's very friendly with Thierry Henry. She knows her football inside out. And she always said to me, one day I'm going to leave the salon and I'm going to be famous. I'm going to be in a band, and the band's called Texas. And that was it.
That's
and
amazing.
and she did what she said she would do.
33 years later.
That's right.
That's amazing. Listen, I mean, say no if you don't want to do this.
What's
but
that?
I'm just wondering, can we call her?
Yes, for sure.
You know, if you're happy,
Yes. Yeah.
if I type in the number now and we just
Are
see
you
if
kidding?
she's knocking around, because it'd be a very special moment.
Mate, let's do it.
Let's give it a go. Do you know what she's doing this afternoon?
I think
Well, it's ringing. Hold on.
Hello.
Charlene?
Hello.
Hello, it's Steve Denyer from Virgin
Hello,
Radio here. I'm
Steve.
here with Jim. He's just given me your number. I hope you don't mind.
Oh, I terribly mind.
Charlene Spiteri, is it really you?
It really is me, Jim White. Is that really you?
I love this.
Are you phoning me to tap me for a haircut?
I love it. Listen, it's only the last time my hair has been in any way closely fashionable is when it was cut by you. It's been a mess ever
it was.
since.
I mean, I have noticed there's a bit like, oh, there's going a little bit scissor happy on that. Your hairdresser will hate me, but I must admit, I did give you the best haircuts, mate.
You sure did. Do you know what I loved about it though, Charlene? It was our patter. It was our chat. And you said to me, "You watch me go, boy. One day I'm going to be famous, a hell of a lot more famous than you, and I'm going to sing in a band that the world is going to love." And by God, you did it.
Shut up.
You did it. You
We've
did
done
it.
all right. We've had a moment. Yeah, it's funny because, you know, and there's a little bit of me still thinks I'm a hairdresser in Glasgow.
Brilliant. I've just been telling Steve and his huge audience here that one of my all-time favourite tracks is "Tell Me Why," and I love.
Oh, wow.
I love that. I love that number. I love all your numbers, but that's the
I
one.
love that Jim's going a bit like off piece. He's a bit like, I'm going to go Tell Me Why. I'm going to just find something that maybe people don't know. So yeah.
Listen, are you still following the mighty Glasgow Celtic? Are you still pally with Thierry Henry?
Of course. Well, Thierry's my daughter's godfather, so it would be a bit off if I wasn't.
Wow, this is amazing. Listening to you two, it's like listening to Scottish royalty. It really is.
I was going to say, Steve, that when you're listening to us, you're going, listening to you two is like listening to somebody that needs subtitles.
But listen, are you still recording? Are you still performing?
Yep, we're playing Glastonbury this year, so we'll see everybody at Glastonbury, and we just went with a new single. New single just came out after all, came out last week, and we have got the very best of Texas from 1890 to 2023 coming out for Glastonbury.
Fantastic, Charlene. You just don't age. Absolutely brilliant.
She really
That's
does.
because your eyes have gone, mate. That's what that is.
Would you come back in and see us, Charlene, soon? Because we
Yeah.
love you, and we loved it when you were in for Kate Lawler the other year. Your shows are brilliant, and I'd like
thank
you should
you.
come in and we'll do this and pick your favourite songs and stuff, and come and see Jim and hang out with us. But
Definitely.
thank you
Definitely.
so
I will
much.
pop in and see you all.
Please do
It
that.
was a pleasure.
I'll wait until I need a haircut.
I'll bring my scissors. That's what I was going to say. I'll bring my scissors. I'll cut it in the offices.
Brilliant. I love you dearly. Thanks so
Charlene,
much, Charlene.
thank you so much. Love you lots.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Speak
Bye.
to you soon. Have a good day. Bye. Bye.
That was special. That was great, wasn't
She's
it?
just exactly the same
Yeah.
as she was all these years ago.
Because she
with
does
a
come
pair of
across as
scissors
a
in her hand.
girl done good. You know.
You're absolutely right, Steve. And, feet in the ground, humble as you like, but by God, she can perform. And so can they as a band. But what a voice.
Yeah.
What a voice.
Yeah. What an
Great.
incredible talent.
Yeah.
Talking of which, Jim, thank you so much for joining me this week. It's
I've
been
loved it.
incredible sat here,
I've loved
hearing
it.
all your stories. It's an
you.
incredible moment, and you've been a brilliant guest. And thank you for being such a great person. You're an inspiration, and I hope I know you for a very long time.
And me, you, Steve. And I love your warmth. I love you about the place in here. This is the start of a wonderful friendship,
I hope
Steve.
so.
I hope so. I might say, Simon Jordan has told me, give Steve my number because I want to do that show with him.
There we
So,
go.
I'm afraid you've got to do it.
Jim White, thank you very much.
Thanks to you, mate.